one lady was curious about like should it be always in English in making asking question? Of course not. So you don't have to. If you are more comfortable with the Korean language, me too. I am more comfortable with Korean language than English. So please don't hesitate writing your question or comment in Korean. The second part of this question of this lady is why organic molecule is only in living things. One thing is the one reason why organic molecule is only found in the living thing. It's not living things, but once lived also is made up of organic molecules too. But the thing is, it's a necessity to establish any living structure, the organism structure. It is absolutely necessary to have so-called the macro molecules. Big, huge molecules are needed. To begin it, you need some big molecules to make cell membrane. And what about the DNA? DNA is another example of such a macromolecules. And all the organelles and other cellular components. That's why. But the only way of creating this such a macromolecule is through organic molecules. By definition, organic molecules is a carbon-containing molecules. One very obvious exception is carbon dioxide, I said. Carbon dioxide, even though it contains carbon, but it's having two oxygen in their two both arms. That carbon dioxide is, as one exception, still considered as an inorganic molecule, non-organic molecule. But other than that, all other carbon-containing molecules are regarded as organic. Why? Because once you invite your chemical structure, invite carbon in it, then now you can create, you can expand the dimension of this molecule so greatly through another expanded chemical bond. That's why in the chapter 2 we are going to study several chemical bonds, because that through chemical bonds is the results that we get to see in the cell that as a macromolecule. That's why we need to recognize, we need to be able to recognize some of the names of chemical bonds. That's why chapter 2 deals with all those boring chemistries. But anyway, these macromolecules are the one reason why organic molecules are there to begin with in the living cell. And next. So this organic, so I have already corrected the definition of the organic molecule. It's not some kind of specific group, so but in the periodic table, on the elementary table, but anything that contains the carbon can be considered as the organic. In terms of this element-wise, carbon actually, you're right about it. This carbon is very similar to, in terms of a chemical, the property, to silicon. In that both carbon and silicon share the same number of the very outside electron numbers. Okay. That affects the ability of forming chemical bond. So in other words, the silicon can also, theoretically speaking, silicon can also form of a chemical bond which is similar to that of carbon, so that they can form this extensive way of chemical bond, so that theoretically speaking, it is able to establish another macromolecular structure. So actually, some biochemistry already a long time ago, ever since, have kind of speculated that maybe in other planet other than Earth, some silicon-based life may exist, kind of because the chemical properties structurally and chemical the reactivity, silicon and carbons are both very similar, but still silicon is much heavier in terms of the weight. The element, atomic weight-wise, silicon is heavier than carbon. So maybe there is some very critical reason why silicon is not really favorably used in forming life on Earth, even with such a very seemingly, at least seemingly similar chemical property. That's all I can say about this silicon and carbon. Oh, shoot. Sorry, my mistake. I should have actually deleted this name, but I forgot. My bad. I cannot do anything about so. Forgive me once. Next time I will not do this thing again. When carbon connecting is broken, we get energy from it. Yes, it's good because carbon. We are talking about the macromolecule. Macromolecules are built through all many numerous chemical bond. Each chemical bond contains energy. Why? Because to establish, to build each of a chemical bond, you have to invest energy. It takes energy. So that energy does not go anywhere. It stays there. So once you break this chemical bond, then that stored energy will be released. That's the reason why we eat food, right? Didn't I say it? So in other words, then when the carbon connecting is broken, probably what she said, what she meant was rebuilt. When carbon rebuilt, then is our energy stolen? Sort of true. It's just energy. So to speak, rule of energy, let's say, energy conservation. Actually, that's explained in the form of, in your lecture handout, in the form of the first law of thermodynamics in your handout, lecture handout, the first chapter. The first the first law of thermodynamics is about all this energy conservation. You cannot create any energy, new energy, nor can you break any energy. Energy stays all the same. The total amount of energy in the entire universe stays exactly the same, is what this so-called the first law of thermodynamics. It's an absolute doctrine or golden rule of physics, so nobody can say or do or break or disobey anything. That is the reason why. So what about we get the energy or anything, or power plant to generate energy? Is all something that converting one form of energy into different forms so that we can utilize. For example, when we eat food, we are breaking the original energy stored in the chemical bond of the food, then releasing them, and then we use that energy into something else. So that is true. When we try to reconnect those broken chemical carbon bond, we have to reinvest the energy, whatever available we have. So it's always you take and then you have to give in. It doesn't change any total amount of energy. Is the golden rule. This one. Why plants and animals have some different kind of hierarchical organization pattern? Because they are evolutionarily so remote. So, in one example, in plants, there are some specific, unique group of the tissues that function very similar to the embryonic stem cell. If you are rather familiar with what the stem cells are, and they are well overexposed in plants, and they can function anytime in their lifetime. For one example, so with that kind of example, obviously the organization system between plant and animals are different enough, even though basically they share the same feature of tissue and organ system organization pattern, but there are still certain differences. And why they are different? Because they are so distantly related enough already in terms of their evolution. That's what. So emergent property here, small cellular components gather together to form a cell, or maybe small cells get together to have a functional unit of a specific tissue is a very good example of such emergent property. It's not an example of emergent property itself, but by observing such behavior, you can detect the presence or occurrence of emergent property. That's what I said, okay, in the last lecture. So emergent property is not something, so to speak, intrinsic to this higher level of organization, but by doing this, we get confused. Human get confused to observe, oops, certain things popped up at this level. We have never anticipated at the lower level. So, that's emergent property, because emergent property by definition is not something only unique to the biology. You can observe in other systems like engineering and maybe in humanity too. So it's only simply saying that that same emergent property, that something mysterious, at least seemingly, also exists in the case of living system is all what says. But in reality, the actual nature of emergent property was our illusion or the revelation or confession of how stupid we are is that my point was. Because emergent property, something new property came up? No, it is not. It is simply your failure of understanding completely the complexity of this interaction of small components. Smaller component interaction will generate certain feature property that you didn't think of that would have existed. But it's not their fault, but your fault. You are stupid not to anticipate such complex interaction is what it is. So, give me an example, she said. So what kind of, so in terms of reductionism, you said that this emergent property as an illusion, as I said, is because of our way of, our habit of studying science traditionally. So, is there any example? There are too many, tons of examples of, because that has been the standard of way of studying science. When you want to study something, then the first step is to study the basic small components. And then you try to understand fully, but each of the function and mechanism of each component, and then combine all together to have any explanation about all together as a whole how they work, because each component will work this, and probably the entire thing will do. So there is a reason why when you study cell, the first thing you study the way is you study cellular organelle first. So each by studying organelles function and structure, and all together you try to understand entire cell's function. Another example, maybe you are not really familiar with at this point. When you try to understand the way we breathe, like taking in the mitochondria, when you try to breathe in and then produce the energy, there is some specific components involved. And then through the interaction of each component, and then finally you generate the energy. And traditionally, you study each component function. That has been the example. And you all together, once you master each functional component of this respiration, so it's breathing in, and then you try to connect them all over finally to make an entire complete story. One big problem is this. Once you isolate each component of your mitochondria, enabling this breathing and then generating energy, once you isolate individual components and then put them all together in a test tube, do you think you will be able to replicate this functionality? No. Just because you add each entire 100% component in the test tube does not produce any energy. But when they were in the mitochondria, they produce energy. What's going on? That's another example of studying individual component to understand the whole function, but in reality, you cannot really understand or explain how exactly because you ignore the specific way of their interaction. So you didn't know how to arrange or assemble them correctly in the test tube. If you knew, then you should have been able to correctly assemble or arrange them, each component in the test tube, so that you could replicate. Voila. But I think personally, and it's not wild imagination anyway, I think sooner than later, scientists even are able to replicate exactly in the test tube those kind of functionality. Because it is just like we are in the process of understanding more and more, so eliminating one by one of all those elements of such uncertainty or illusion that we formerly regarded as like emergent property. No, it is not emergent property, but your stupidity is. Another example, long time ago, although it was like in Chinese medicine, like ginseng, we all know that ginseng is very good for our health. So all those Chinese doctors, Chinese medicine doctors all knew, but didn't know what exactly, what is the ingredient that actually making this in the ginseng that help our human health. German scientists actually, long time ago, they were capable of analyzing all these chemical components. So they analyzed every different components of in the ginseng, and then they identified all different chemical ingredients in ginseng. So they thought, okay, we could replicate chemically. So we know all about what's present in the ginseng. So they isolated, purified each of those active ingredients, and then combined in the pill. What do you think? It didn't have any effect. That's another example. You studied the component, and then you're confident that once you mastered each component, though chemically, so it's just a matter of combining and then put it, then it will work the same? No. Another emergent property? No, it isn't. Still, you didn't know. You missed something. How they are put together in nature to make some actual meaningful effect is the thing. The question was, if, like you said, this diversification from spreading from a common ancestor and being different over and over time, does that mean then in the future the number of different species will be increased? Isn't it theoretically? Yes, yeah, of course, obviously. But there is always that has been always the counter force playing on. So naturally, without any interruption, obviously this number of new species should be increased on this according to this logic, but always in the history of Earth, there's been always at intervals some kind of mass disasters, extinction. So all diversified, back then blooming different species got wiped out in mass scale. A lot of times, those major mass extinction that we have witnessed is something like it's five extinction, each of which actually something like 80, almost 90 in some occasions, almost 90% of the entire species got extinct, and then reset. With those 10% or 20% survivors, they started all over again, and then once again the bloom, and then another strike of this extinction has been the way. So yes, without such mass extinction interruption, obviously yes, number of species would have been stayed and keep being increased, but it is not in reality. The mutant. So this is something that I don't know where you get this information, this lady. So it said she learned that the occurrence of a mutant is due to this gamete production when we try to produce sperm or eggs, and some kind of things, mutation occur, and that's why we have this variation. No, it is not. Like I said earlier in today's lecture, the event occurring during the gametes sex cell production is what we called recombination. Genetic recombination is simply reshuffling. Okay? Yeah, it will boost. It will facilitate the variability appearing outside, but it does not create any new variability through recombination. The only way of generating new genetic variation is through mutation. By definition, mutation is strictly put change in DNA sequence alteration, especially just right before or during DNA replication due to mistake, or some of the physical or chemical reagents increased such instance of mutation. But one very important thing about the mutation is it always occurs spontaneous. The spontaneity is randomness. It will occur spontaneous. That means it will occur randomly in different individuals. So you cannot predict what kind of mutation you will have in each different individual. That's why everybody is different. Because the changed region is different in everybody. That's the beauty of this mutation. Okay? Here is actually a very still a headache and the mystery about this identical twin. In theory, identical twins are genetically identical, so theoretically you should have identical, everything identical, a clone. But in reality, even identical twin, you can tell the difference. They are. And their behaviors are obviously something. They are not identical. So what comes? Where do those differences come? For these two identical twins, they are supposed to be genetically identical. Here, all we can say is an environment, of course. Environmental effect. And also, a lot of progress has been also been made in these days. Some kind of new element of genetics, we call those epigenetics. Yeah, maybe some of those biological system biology majors or some other related field, they may have heard these things like epigenetics, but I don't want to go into that. But that's something like have some role in playing in making these subtle differences even in the genetically identical twins. But simply put, at this point, at this level, environment can affect. So that's why she said this by acquired reason, acquired. So acquired means environment can influence this and then somehow affect the gene's function, environment. So in that way, at least some of the genes' function can be affected differently by different environment. And even if these same identical twins are raised on the same environment, but still their response, their reactivity is slightly different from, because their environment perception is can be different depending on different circumstances. That's why still two identical twins can be greatly different. Lifespan of a unicellular organism is defined as this. What's the lifespan of a multicellular organism? Like, what's the lifespan of us? When we die, how do we define death? Yes.
Inexorable death for living beings, but in the end, our cells continue to live until there's the energy and everything is transferred to everything outside our body.
That's good. Yeah, that's good definition. So medically speaking, like your brain stops or your heart stops, then medically we declare some of the kind of deaths. But chemically, like physiologically, all this cells, energy, that's actually metabolism that I was going to talk about so we are going to get back to this metabolism. But anyway, all those activities cease to function, then we basically recognize that this cell no longer exists or no longer survives or lives. Okay. But in the case of a single cell, it's just kind of slightly different, because one lifespan of this, because here the multicellular organisms, the reason why we define death in that way is due to the presence of a differentiation. Once differentiated cells do not divide anymore, cell division. That's actually something to do with this cancer thing too. So every cell, once they proliferate, they divide, and then at one point, at a certain point, they determine that, they decide, oh, I will go into this differentiation route. And once they go into this differentiation route, then these cells do not do this cell division anymore. They stay. At that point, we can talk about cells death. Like that. Okay. But here, this single cell, unicellular organism, they don't do that. They keep divide. So, in other words, simply, I don't want to go into any complexity. In the case of a single cell, this would be one generation. Right? One cell will become two. What's the lifetime of this cell? This period. Until this cell split to become two independent entity while you can enjoy it. That's your lifespan. And it depends on different cell type. It can be like as short as 30 or 40 minutes, or as many as several days, or that's how the single cell, or maybe some other single cells also, because they can control the timing of this split deliberately. And different cells control their timing of this division differently. So that's why even single cell, the unicellular organism, they have all different range, spectrum of lifespan. Are these called organelles? Yes. These are the organelles. And the more importantly, the utility, why these eukaryotic cells have different organelles is the more important thing to remember. I like this cartoon is because I don't know where this lady have this idea of. Obviously, this represents the prokaryotic cell, and this having many organelles, this must be eukaryotic cells. And like connecting this thing is when you have this the ride in the theme park, you always have a certain like height limit of it. Until you get to reach this height, you cannot ride a certain ride. So that always kind of has an. I also have a strong impression about because that plays in real life of cells, that the same rule also plays in the eukaryotic cell. When cell is trying to divide, next round, one cell is trying to divide into two next round, until this newly produced cell reaches into certain limit of size. Until you grow up, you cannot enter this another round of ride of a roller coaster or whatever. This is a very, very critical point of control in our cell division. Here, of course, she tried to express the difference between smaller bacterial cell and a larger eukaryotic cell. So only it seems like here, large eukaryotic cell can only enjoy this exciting roller coaster. A prokaryotic cell cannot. No, it not. But even in the eukaryotic cells world, if you are small, as a baby cell, newly freshly produced baby eukaryotic cell, there are certain control element that prevent this cell prematurely divide. So that is very, very sensitive matter, actually. Cancer and differentiation. I just try to emphasize, exaggerate this thing that those who do not obey the differentiation are only nothing but cancer is. Yeah, partially it's true, of course. But in reality, the next question also is dealing with similar things. The cancer cells are the result of a mutation. So they are supposed to go just like other average cells, other cells like goes through this differentiation, but this cancer cell, due to the accumulation of some mutation in the sensitive genes, that they can no longer undergo this differentiation. So, if any cells cannot or do not obey the differentiation, will they become cancer? Of course, it's not. But cancer's problem is they keep dividing. So if the other cells also, because this differentiation and then cell division is totally uncompromisable. Two things. If you go this differentiation, then you give up your ability to dividing. Or if you give up this differentiation, then you can keep enjoying yourself as a dividing cell. That's why usually you get to see this cancer cell as an undifferentiated cell. Because once you desert this mission of differentiation, then you can still keep enjoying the cell division and making the annoyance and damage to other tissues. So that's what we can say about it. And another thing is maybe from the other angle, why differentiation? Why all these multicellular organisms always have to obey the differentiation? Then otherwise you cannot play the function. The reason why, think about that, why these multicellular organisms have this differentiation. With this, they have a division of their different roles, functionally divided and then specialized so that even with the whole this multicellularity, they still can function efficiently as an entire individual. This is the functionality wise. So if you lose this differentiation ability, then you cannot function properly as a multicellular organism. Maybe? So this is kind of similar. So to answer to this question, for example, UV rays, ultraviolet rays on the skin cancer. The reason why is because by having this some physical or chemical influence, you create mutation. So as a result of this mutation, once you are supposed to remain differentiated, now no longer differentiated, and then they cannot do this differentiation, but they keep dividing. And that's cancer. And on the skin layer, there is a certain very sensitive cell kind of tissues that are more sensitive to this type of mutation. That's why you have vulnerability to this skin cancer under UV light. What do you think? Do you want to live in the environment without air? Maybe you don't want to breathe. Maybe you're too lazy to breathe. Me too. Yeah. I wish I could live without breathing, without air. The thing is, then we have to first, theoretically it is doable, but to do so, we have to have total makeshift, total change, because the way we generate energy is totally dependent upon this air. You mean air means probably oxygen. So without oxygen, you cannot generate energy. So probably you have to come up with another alternative way of creating energy without using this oxygen. Maybe hydrogen? Why not? Yeah. So in that way you can, but to do so probably you have to redesign everything. So chances are evolving from us, evolving into the creature, not depending on the oxygen, air, but something else like hydrogen or something else as an energy source would be. It's not entirely impossible, but it is very difficult because once we have already fixed our being throughout the long course of evolution into this small box limit. So get out of this limit would take very, very much reshuffling, which is technically very, very difficult. Yes, question number one. So inorganic, under inorganic status, initially, those materials. But once you have this sort of very wonderful structure like a cell, inside of which you can somehow generate first type of organic molecules, and then you can keep making progress. And that's how we have been. That's at least a theory, scientists believe. So, although we cannot put the symbol of equal, this life equals to organic macromolecule, that is not. However, without organic macromolecule, life is not possible. That's at least true. Because all this material, raw material that need the life, with which life built, are all macromolecules. Okay. And these organic macromolecules are needed for both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. All together, both. So You may think the prokaryotes are simpler than eukaryotes, so prokaryotes do not need as much organic macromolecule as the eukaryote. No, that is not true. It's the same thing. Both prokaryote and eukaryote require same type of, same quality of organic macromolecule. And multicellular organisms, yes, these are collection of many different cells. However, once again, not only that, in addition to that, another very important requirement is each of these cells will function differently through differentiation. And if you don't have this nucleus, that means you don't have any genetic material, then it is not possible to do anything because it all depends on the function of the genes. So if you don't have any, as a cell, if you don't have any nucleus, then you cannot achieve this any whatsoever. Maybe you are bringing up some red blood cell that that red blood cell do not have any nucleus, but wait for a second. And yeah, maybe this lady is a humanity major or social science major. Or I was one of them too once. When I was in college in Korea, I was an economics major, not the science major. So then I went to the U.S. and then studied all over again from the undergraduate. I know what it takes. So you are tasting totally different water as a non-major. I know. I feel for you. And another kind of difficulty for those outsider is this terminology. Once you jump into whole new different water, what scares you mostly is kind of different terminology. But it's not only in the life science, but if I want to go into and then try to learn some coding, computer science coding, also I will suffer from some whole new terminology. First, you have to learn how to ignore the terminology. Terminology is nothing. Terminology is some kind of agreement and promise to call. What should my call? What should we call this thing? So let's call this. This is a very stupid garbage terminology. So don't get scared about different terminology, but whenever some new unfamiliar, because it's totally new, unfamiliar, because that's why it's difficult for you to keep them longer in your memory. I know. But just because it fly away, it escapes more rapidly, you have a shorter memory in terminology, don't get disappointed. Yeah, that's natural. And then look it up again, and then usually, eventually, it will become part of you. So terminology is the least thing that you need to worry about. This is probably my 1 cent. Well, there's no such thing like 1 cent, but it is my 2 cents. Intelligence. We should be able to correctly, conceptually define the intelligence. What's intelligence? It's something ability that we can recognize and make a decision and reaction. It's all together we define intelligence. So yes, initially, superficially, we thought intelligence is nothing but the result of a connection of neuron cells, nerve cells. Then we just downplay the value of intelligence. Hey, if this only neurons connection is intelligence, what is it? No, it is not. But this connection will generate some specific accumulation of information as a memory, and specific area of such stimulation and with some specific memory of information, then you generate whole new thing called emotion. Sometimes those are also part of the intelligence. And maybe the translation wise, this intelligence but in Koreans, this intelligence can either be translated into this or this. And these two different words make very big difference in terms of this kind of the meaning. So maybe we should try to approach this. But unfortunately, artificial intelligence, we translate this as using this word instead of this. So that's why, hey, artificial intelligence, how do you explain the artificial intelligence? Yeah, it's the same thing. Just like the way the brain process this information and keep some kind of property against or in response to certain stimulus, all together collectively we recognize as intelligence. And because it's so complex and mysterious, that's why we usually tend to put this thing into as a category of emergent property. So initially, actually, I have a very close friend who majored in computer science, and then like something 20 years ago, when he was in the graduate school, I asked him about, hey, intelligence, artificial intelligence, is it really possible? And he said, no, it's a dream, pipe dream. Don't even think about it. Now, it's in reality. How? How do they do that? They try to mimic how brain works, how brain process this information, and then create some certain kind of character or domain is how and what we have come up with this today's artificial intelligence. So that intelligence same, this AI, as long as they can manipulate the same information as our brain, is why not? We can also explain their functionality. Although complexity-wise nowadays, even scientists who originally created this artificial intelligence cannot even follow their logic. Artificial intelligence logic is some kind of a potential danger. Human red blood cells, why don't they have a nucleus? That is not actually correct, 100% correct one. When they are born, when they are made, human and other mammals, red blood cells do also have a nucleus, of course. Without nucleus, they cannot produce anything. But as they grow, as they mature, it's another differentiation. As they differentiate, they have they have some kind of decision making. Oh, my function is what? The only reason I am existing is making what? Hemoglobin protein. So, red blood cell make some kind of critical decision. Oh, I need only to have hemoglobin protein produced. So, let's try to produce as much hemoglobin protein as possible quickly. And once I have done it, I have complete my homework, and then I even get rid of my nucleus. That's how we end up the red blood cell. Later, when at their maturity, when we observe, oh, they don't have any nucleus. All they have is hemoglobin protein. But when they were baby, yes, they had nucleus. And from that nucleus, they produced a lot of hemoglobin protein. Okay. And that also only applies to the red blood cells of mammals. The reptiles and other kind of animals, red blood cells still have nucleus. Outside of the planet Earth, once we encounter with another life form, then we will know what kind of other criteria we should apply, because right now all we know is the life forms that we are familiar with. That's why we have used this kind of category to include or exclude any object in the whether it's a living or non-living. But outside of this Earth, outside of extraterrestrial thing, whether there is other living object, although if they were featuring the same characteristic, then we can maintain our logic, but it could be different. Who knows? I'd like to ask the author of this nice drawing, this cartoon, why? What is this? Who is this? Is my wife? This is a lovely cartoon. Thank you. I don't know altogether what kind of the message is being portrayed by this cartoon, but this is a kind of cartoon that I would like to. If you don't have anything else, then try to draw nice cartoons so that we can enjoy all together. What kind of failure, unfortunate, disappointing failure over here, I don't know what she was talking about, but despite that, it's a lovely cartoon. Thank you. So, okay. So I spent kind of a rather length, 20 minutes extra in dealing with going over the questions. So if this trend persists, then I may have actually cut some of the question, then later put only in the recording so that it does not affect too much on our planned progress of the schedule of the lecture. At least that's my plan. But always my plan always miserably fails. That's kind of a representation of my entire life. So what can I say? Okay, so getting back to this. So we were here. This evolution, and under this scheme of a playground of this evolution by natural selection, these three homeworks that every individual under such same environment condition has to fulfill this homework. One is metabolism, the other one is kind of a characteristic of being responsive to external stimuli, and the homeostasis. By the way, of course, all these, each of these categories are kind of summarized in your lecture handouts. So if you want to go back and then try to make a more organized way of description, yes, so be it. But probably this is kind of more like I only emphasize some of the importances. So that's why I just decided to only go over this rather than individually, one by one, going over, which is kind of a waste of time. So anyway, what is metabolism? Anyone can define metabolism? Because we casually use this word. Oh, my body metabolism is, today my body metabolism went up, so I just feel so active. Oh, today my body metabolism is so down. I feel lousy. So then, what is metabolism anyway? Is metabolism a kind of mood? What is it? It's all different kind of chemical reaction. Every chemical reactions occurring in the living system. In the living system. When you are dead, you don't have any metabolism. Only when you are alive, you can have a metabolism. And metabolism is nothing but chemical reactions. All these chemical reactions. The question is why? Why in living cell, inside of living cell, we have the whole, I hate chemical reactions. Why you are here? Why do we have these chemical reactions inside of living cell? What's the reason? For fun? There's no fun. Why? What do we get by having this whole stupid different tens of thousands different chemical reactions always having in our cell? For what reason? Because it's there? Because we cannot get rid of them? No. It is very critical, absolutely required. Why? Because of energy. Through metabolism, we take care of this energy. When we need energy, we have to extract some energy from somebody else because did I mention that the first law of thermodynamics? Yes, I did today. The first law of thermodynamics states that you cannot create energy, nor can you break the energy. That's the golden rule. So, in other words, if you need energy, you have to take some energy from somebody else. There's no way you can create. Even power plant cannot create energy. So, but energy is something that you desperately need for your existence, unfortunately. Because the cell itself, the starting point of a cell itself is a whole lump of energy itself. Without any energy, it's not been possible. Because energy is the cell is highly complex organization. In order to build this complex organization, it takes energy. That's another. That is about the second law of thermodynamics, which is about entropy. So this is something about entropy. So in order to maintain this highly complex structure, you stay afloat on the water. You have to keep doing this. It's just like same thing. So you have to keep providing the energy in order to maintain your complex structure. Not only that, it's not only your maintenance, but a lot of times you have to synthesize something. Whenever you try to synthesize something, whenever you try to build something, it takes money. Energy is money. So you can intuitively think that it will require energy. So all those energy requirements will be provided by who? Food, break down and release the energy. That's metabolism. Kind of chemical reaction. Through one very specific chemical reaction, you extract the energy, and with that extracted energy, now you convert that energy into some different form so that you can utilize. That's how you do when actually in your mitochondria. The job of your mitochondria is that mitochondria is doing that job very good, so that they can generate so much amount of such a very convenient form of the convenient mobile form of energy. We call that as ATP. Probably. Yeah. So ATP. That's one side of the story of this metabolism. And another thing is, with those energy, you provide this energy to build or synthesize something. That's another side of the story. So these two sides of the groups of different chemical reactions. Like I said, there are tens of thousands of different kinds of chemical reactions, but all, in nature, they can be grouped into either one or the other, two different groups of chemical reactions. One is energy releasing chemical reaction. As a result of this chemical reaction, energy will be released. Just like you break your food molecule down so that energy released. That's one such kind. How is it called? And a little more details are described in your lecture handout. But I deliberately avoid mentioning that even terminology, because terminology is not important. Another such type of a chemical reaction is using the energy input, you try to synthesize some more complex molecule. So think about this. From inorganic molecule into some organized organic macromolecule in the beginning step of the creating cell, the first cell, probably it must have taken this type of chemical reaction, providing the energy. So anyway, chemical reactions are all very much so many diverse chemical reactions, but either one kind of a reaction which is energy releasing, or another kind of reaction, energy requiring reaction. That's all. But either way, they are all metabolism. So that's why all different metabolisms are constantly occurring in the living cell. So if you don't do this, what happens? Hey, you're so lazy. I'm so lazy like me, so I don't want to do this metabolism. What do you do? Then what you have become? You will die. Sorry, but your privilege to live has been just expired. Sorry. Maybe next time around, if you have any chance. That's it. So that's why every living organism so diligently keeping up. Where are you? Keeping up with this metabolism. That's why you get to see. You never miss to observe metabolism in any different kind of a living thing. That's why. Second category is what? Response to stimuli. What is this? Let's say you are a single-celled organism, but you are an eukaryote, so you have your gene inside. Outside, whole outside is a jungle out there. It's keep changing environment. You are left alone here. How can you optimize your survivability with this changing condition? Aren't you like scared? Probably one thing that you better actually make sure is to be able to detect what's going on outside. Because, for example, if outside environment, if there are plenty of food material out there, I can just scavenge it. For example, there are plenty of glucose out there, then I can just fish them in, so that we can funnel in the food, lots of food, so we can just enjoy our feast, so we can be a little more relaxed. Oh, we have a plenty of whatever. Don't worry, life is good. Okay. Or but on the other hand, if there are actually really scarcity of food, like a glucose molecule, so there is not much anything available food outside, then don't you want to know in advance so that like to prepare like in advance? So hey, outside there is no food like glucose. I cannot see any single sign of glucose. If we can somehow detect in advance, then wouldn't it be really better for our like competitiveness or survivability, so that we can somehow prepare? Hey, we better be like saving our whatever resources, so that we better not try something stupid like spending or wasting our energy or anything. Yeah. That's one very stupid, simple example, but outside, detecting what's going on in the environment outside is extremely important, and the better can you detect outside the environment, and the better you be able to survive. So it directly is related with your survivability, being able to detect and respond accordingly. That's collectively called respond to external stimuli. Any stimuli is an environmental condition. So for that matter, what do we have? We better have so many different kinds of some antenna-like structure on the surface of a cell. Collectively we call that as a what? How would you call that? Oh, good. Thank you. Receptor. So one of them must be a glucose, recognizing glucose-specific receptor. The other one must be some kind of other goodies like calcium receptor, and so many different receptors, all of which are basically made of some macromolecule called proteins. Proteins are also used over here. So with these tools, like we call the receptors, we can detect outside environment as what? Stimulus. Each of different environmental signal we perceive as a stimulus, and we react accordingly. If there are many glucose, like insulin, okay. If in the blood, if too much glucose, then we react accordingly. Like, hey, let's import more of a glucose. If there are very little glucose, then we send a signal to somebody else. Hey, produce some more glucose, break down some glucose in the liver, stupid. And like those type of reactions, specific reactions are involved, and you know how urgent and important such reaction is. That's collectively we call as a response to stimuli. Okay? And so, if you think about this, would prokaryote be able to neglect this beauty? Because prokaryotes are just pretty simple. Then eukaryote. So eukaryote, you guys are complex, unnecessarily complex entities. So you guys worry too much, and your fate. But me, as a prokaryote, as a simple life form, why should I worry about this thing? Oh no, it is not. They also. So both prokaryote and eukaryote, they must be very, very sensitive to this. So both of them have this ability in full capacity on their own. So these are something that everybody, whether it's a prokaryote or a eukaryote, everybody has to have this. What about homeostasis? It's a kind of a special kind of this response to stimulus, actually, the homeostasis. Homeo kind of this sounds like what? Homeo. Sameness. Homo, same thing. Stasis. So the definition-wise, homeostasis is try to maintain certain particular condition constant, same. But that's only half of the definition. The real, more important definition is under the changing environment. Despite changing environment, cells try to maintain certain particular, not all but certain condition constant. That kind of efforts we collectively recognize as homeostasis. Examples of homeostasis is not difficult to bring up. Like as a warm-bodied animal, we always have this homeostasis status of body temperature. Always try to, even if outside temperature is something like 4 degrees Celsius or something 40 degrees Celsius, still inside our body temperature, we try to maintain somehow using so much efforts, try to maintain constant something like a 37 degrees Celsius. And the blood glucose level and some of the calcium level, so many examples. But that's only very rough external observational examples, but actually inside of the cell there are so many examples of very tiny, detailed, microscopic parameters that we actively Active is another keyword. Actively maintain this condition constant. Under, even. Making constant is not such a big deal. Look at the chameleon. Because in the case of chameleon, they don't really maintain their body temperature constant, but simply they have a lifestyle of, hey, what the heck, go with the flow. Right? So if the temperature outside is hot, and so be it, I will be also hot. And if the temperature outside is cold and cool, that's why chameleon can. Because the environment outside of the chameleon is they never go below zero or anything, so that's why still they can survive. Even if this temperature is cool, so be it, I will be cool too. But, so trying to be identical to outside environment, sometimes it can be simple as that. But the difficulty of this homeostasis is with changing, still you are trying to resist against those trends. But hey, still I'm stubborn. No matter what, I will have my own. Some kind of character identity is what the homeostasis is great about. And the thing is, because of that, guess what? Homeostasis, even in response to stimuli in a lot of time, not all, but at least some of this activity in under the category of response to stimuli, you can come by freely. You don't really, you do not have to spend too much energy. Just let it go, and then you simply be smart, wise enough so that you can simply detect or something. It may be possible. I'm not saying it always, but without any exception, in the case of this homeostasis, you definitely have to do what? You always have to spend energy. It is an expensive process because you are trying to resist against something. Whenever something that you are trying to do something unnatural, it takes money. Whenever you are trying to do something against the rule in our society, what do? You have to open your wallet and take the bribery. Just like that. So, this homeostasis, in order to operate this homeostasis, you always have to. That's why I use this word active. It's not a passive process, but it is an active process. Active means always you have to willing to spend the energy. You have to spend, you have to provide the energy to maintain this, is what we call active. So that's something. So all this, especially because of that, a dead cell, once they were living cell, but once they are, the minute they are dead, you cannot detect anything. Chemical metabolism, some of the chemical metabolism still you may be able to observe in a dead cell, because if that chemical reaction can occur spontaneously, it will naturally still, it will be there just like they are in the test tube. But especially in the case of homeostasis, you will never be able to witness any presence of a homeostasis in a non-living cell. Okay? So, with that, if you did all this homework well enough, then you can achieve certain degree of this individual adaptation. And with that, you can join in to this as an individual basis. You can be like, am I eligible for your selection, God? Anything? So, with all together, evolution. So evolution, although always this evolution is going on at the level of, as a scale of whole entire population as a group wise, but that group is simply nothing but a collection of every different individuals. and each different individual will display their fitness and then will be judged by their reproductive success. It will make an outcome of how much of a gene will be present in the something like 50 years later or 500 years after later. How much of your gene will be still present in this particular location is the result, whether you have succeeded or not. So in that way, you are still doing this. See? One other reason that you better thinking about get married and then produce your beautiful children, isn't it? Because if you want to live forever. So once that separate this group from the other, now we recognize as a speciation only. Evolution, occurrence of evolution, of course, in the middle of evolution there is a kind of a trick. The way we can detect whether evolution is going on or not, but at least ultimately you can finally declare, oh, evolution has occurred or not, can only be seen by the occurrence of a species, new species or not. Is how, that's how. What's important is, individually I have tried to explain each one by bit, yeah, fine. But more important thing is, how they are related with this. Each of these category, parameters, characteristics are interconnected with something. If you make this list up, instead of having this diagram, if you simply have 7 categories like listed up, probably a lot of time chances are you may miss this more important association, relatedness. But with this, hopefully, you get to understand at least partially their relatedness and why they are still here and where are we still going with this is final. Actually, the only maybe important theme of this first chapter is this, understanding this thing. Okay, so rest of the thing is the extra gravy. So the name I just mentioned, I was reluctant about mentioning this chemical reaction is this, but it's all in your lecture handout, so I don't want to go into this thing. And all together inside of cells with these 2 different kinds of metabolism. One is energy generating metabolism with this food. And with this energy, you have another synthetic reaction activity so that you can build another new macromolecules are occurring at the same time. And all together, all these 2 groups of different kinds of chemical reaction make up for entire metabolism, and all are. That's why all the metabolisms are related with what? Energy transaction. It's all because of the energy that the cell needs. And that at the center of such energy transaction is an ATP, is whatever. The important thing about this ATP is a rechargeable battery. It's a battery, but you can recharge and then reuse it. Is the beauty of this particular chemical we call them ATP, and that's why we use this ATP as a very convenient tool or source of energy. Whenever we need an energy transaction, you open your wallet and then give the cash, right? So ATP is behaved as a cash in our economic transactions. And this is the chemical structure of ATP. Everybody has to memorize this thing because I'm going to ask to draw the chemical structure of ATP in the midterm exam. Kidding, of course. That's the last thing I would do, right? memorize anything, something, and then something like stupid like this. No, ATP looks like this, and there is a reason why always the stupid idiot scientists always love to show the chemical structure. There is a reason why, but you have to be one of us. So just okay, let them do and watch. And that's the reason why ATP, adenine, this is the adenine. 1, 2, 3, try. This particular group of chemical is called a phosphate. Phosphate. So 1, 2, 3, 3 phosphate. You have 3 phosphate, so by TP, phosphate. And what A stands for? This whole entire thing is called adenine, and you will get to see this same chemical group structure when it comes to look at the DNA structure too once again. So we are kind of recycling the same material both in the energy as well as in our genetic material too. We are trying to be highly economical, so to speak. So that's why this name, the ATP. So what if this one has only 2 of this? ADP, it becomes ADP. Why do we worry about ADP? Because that's how we do have this recharge mechanism. So ATP, the reason why ATP can be used as energy is you break one chemical bond over here at the edge. Once you break this, then energy is released. And then now as a result, you become 1 phosphate short. Now it becomes ADP, double diphosphate, it's triphosphate. But the beauty is, oh, you are so poor, you lost 1 arm. Don't you worry, you can get repaired. You can go back to there. Why? Thanks to who? The first law of thermodynamics. Energy. Energy doesn't get lost. You do not lose any energy. You release this energy. In the course of spending the ATP is an energy that you can use. So whenever energy is required, you use this. That's why your mitochondria produce so much ATP at a time. So with this with your pocket full of ATP, now you go to any place where the energy is required, and then you spend the energy just like your cash. Okay? Then what happens? This ATP becomes ADP after this reaction. Energy released. That energy is being used in any task. Now what do you do? What do you do? Once used battery, you have to recharge, right? So you have to go back try to convert this into fully charged ATP. How do you do that? You eat. You eat food molecule, break down, and energy will be released. So in going back, in getting back to this fully charged form, what it's taking is only energy. As long as you provide energy, then it can go back to. And so that you can, while during the process of using again, the energy is released. So energy, the same amount of energy will be keep recycled in between, back and forth between ATP and ADP. So where originally can we get this energy? From the poor sacrificed food molecules. Once, as an organic molecule, once those all food molecules, once they were the part of other living forms, unfortunately. So unfortunately, we are at the expense of other precious lives for our survival with this mechanism. Okay, okay, and I think yeah, this we can just come back later about this enzyme, so let's not worry about right now. So with that, I think with stimuli and homeostasis, I have just explained, so I'm not going to go over them again. So if you are really more equipped with detail, then I advise you to read on your own the lecture handout part of these descriptions. But in most part, my version of the explanation about this should suffice. At least understanding basic concept of what they are is. So I think that's it. Okay. So have a nice weekend.